Hello, Keith. Nice to see you.
Hi, Hannah.
How are you
Yes,
doing?
I'm doing very well in the circumstances.
Absolutely. I can see the sunshine behind you, and it's lovely here as well. So, how have you been keeping busy whilst we've all been in this lockdown?
Uh, One word, gardening.
I think you're not the only one. So you've got a long list of gardening jobs.
It never ends. It's a big garden.
Oh, well, thank you for taking the time to have a chat to me. I thought it would be really good to kind of use this time when we're not all able to be at the railway and not able to kind of meet up in person, just to speak to people kind of about their history with the railway, and their thoughts about it now that we're all kind of sat at home. Although for you, obviously, you're actually looking out and you can see the railway from your window, so you're not quite as far away as some of us. Um, so yeah, I thought I would kind of start off by asking you kind of how did it all start? Because you're definitely the person who knows.
Yes, uh, I'll find a starting point. You must understand that nearly 40 years of history in about half an hour or something is not an easy task. But okay, the very start uh, would be in 1983. It happens that at that time I was mayor of Bodmin, and the council received a letter from a group of people who wanted to start up a steam railway on the lines which had recently come defunct. They'd been, once BR took over, left them, the local China Clay people took it over and brought China Clay to the main line from Wenford.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and they wanted to reopen these lines as a steam railway. And they asked the council if they could give them any help. Well, I mean, things then were no better than now. The obvious answer was, sorry, we approve in principle, but you can't give you any money. So subsequently, the chairman of that group called a public meeting in Bodmin,
Mm-hmm.
with the purpose of starting up a new committee, which puzzled me a bit. I didn't know what the reason for doing that was. But anyway, I was installed as the chairman of the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
I think by then I'd finished my term as mayor, and people thought I had nothing else useful to do, so you better do this.
Wanted to keep you busy.
And I think, as everyone knows by now, I was not and am not a railway enthusiast or steam railway enthusiast. My interest was in the community benefit, because Bodmin had lost a lot of important features during this time and was gradually dying, and it needed something back in. So I agreed to chair it,
Mm-hmm.
and I called a meeting at my house one evening, and lo and behold, the chairman of the original group turned up uninvited. And the first thing he said to me was, uh, of course, you're now going to have to pay a bill that we owe to some consultant engineers for some survey work. Uh, so the reason for calling the meeting suddenly became obvious.
Ah.
And I said to him, there had been no mention whatsoever at the preliminary meeting about there being any debts and liabilities, so we weren't going to pay them.
Oh no.
Uh, so he left in great dudgeon, and we had a running battle in the newspapers and that for sort of several months thereafter.
Oh no,
Until I was
a bit of controversy.
Oh yes, yes. Uh, I could talk for another hour probably about just what will happen, between us. But that's not the point. Uh,
That's
we
another
got together.
interview.
We had got our new committee together, and we were faced with a situation where, uh, as I said, BR had given up these tracks from Parkway to Boscarn and Boscarn to Wenford. And when the China Clay traffic stopped, uh, the whole thing was offered to Cornwall Council. That is the normal procedure if a railway closes. The county is usually given the chance to take over. And incidentally, it is that we were eventually only able to raise enough money to do the part from Parkway to General and back to Boscarn, which explains why originally Wenford was included in our company name.
Ah, okay.
That's new to you, is it?
It is. I hadn't known kind of the proper origins. I knew the history of the line, but I don't know why that bit had been included. And then yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, there we are. We're set up as a new committee, and we had regular meetings. And there's me thinking, I don't really want to be involved in this too deeply, but never mind. It won't last 6 months, and I can go back to looking after my own business. But it didn't quite work out that way, and we kept going until eventually we got consent from Cornwall Council to have access to the premises.
Okay.
So we'll go in and have a good look around, and there had been a previous occupant who was renting the place as a second-hand furniture store.
That's a bit different.
Yes, and I should never forget. If you walked around anywhere in the site, just scuff the ground with the toe of your feet, your shoes, and you will stir up several mattress springs, and they were littered all over the place, no matter where you went.
How
I
bizarre.
suppose he burned all his sort of old mattresses and just threw the springs down on the ground.
That would be very
So
confusing, kind of for an archaeologist having a look kind of years down the line. What on earth was going on here?
yes, that's exactly, yeah. Anyway, we started doing work with cleaning the site up and so on, getting generally settled in. But one of the great problems, not surprisingly, was money.
Yeah.
Uh, Anything to do with railways is expensive, but even in these early days, we had nothing, and there was very little income. In fact, so little that my first year working full time with the railway, I wasn't paid at all.
Oh my
But there
goodness.
you are. But we soldiered on, and we got to know what we now, or at that time, called the Bugle Boys. It was a
Okay.
group of people at Bugle who had a very short, about a quarter of a mile length of track.
Mm-hmm.
But they had two steam engines, one of which was in working order.
Wow. Well,
And
if you've got
here
a railway, you're going to need access to some engines.
that's right. We had the track and no engines. They had the engines and no track.
A match made in heaven.
We got together and organised our first public event, which was we couldn't obviously, take passengers or anything. We had no authority then. but we did a demonstration of shunting using the steam engine and just pushing old coaches and that we had around just to show people how things were done. And I remember opening a gate and selling tickets to people, and I had a line of people queued up waiting.
Wow, so there was lots of interest in people coming to
And I
see.
thought, hang on, maybe we're on to something here. I do too remember also I accepted an invitation from someone to do a fire trick and riding a bike through a ring of fire. But I think in case I don't think the authorities want to know about that, so I'll say no more.
Oh my goodness. That sounds very, very dramatic. The next time I come up with a mad idea, I'll remind people of that one.
Well, just don't tell them it's my idea in the first place. But the importance of it to me was that it did show there was some level of interest from the public,
Yeah.
which was quite encouraging, really. So thereafter, soon after that, the two parties decided to merge the Bugle group to come and join as part of the Arab Common in Wentford.
Right.
And many of them are still there. One of them was Martin Blackwell,
Ah,
uh,
okay.
who actually turned out to be my first employee.
Ah, wow.
And several of the people that were Bugle Boys at that time are still associated with the railway. I
Amazing.
think I was just trying to, it occurred to me at this stage, of course, we had, as you say, no engines of our own, no good running stock or anything. And I have to mention there that Peter Fitzgerald, who joined me very early on at the time,
Yep.
was was a tremendous help to us because he purchased some of the engines and coaches and things, which
Yeah.
enabled us to make another step forward.
Yeah. I didn't
So
realise, Keith, that there were so many kind of people who had been involved so early on, who have kind of, seen things through with the railway, and they're still such an important part of it today. So, yeah, that's really,
yeah.
really interesting.
One of them was Ian Nelson, who's now one of our trustees, and his son David.
Yeah.
David has now become chairman of the PLC.
Yes, of course.
And I taught him all he knows.
I'll make sure I tell him that. So yeah, you've seen kind of people like David kind of grow up at the railway, really.
Absolutely, yes. And one thing I shall never forget, and very often Ian and I still talk about this. He turned up one day in the very early days, walked in the office and said, "Here I am. What can I do to help?"
Hey.
So I said, at the moment, one of the things I want to do, I've got a blocked drain and the water's running down the office wall and across the platform. So, okay, he said, and he tackled that. Whether he finished it that day or came back again, I'm not sure, but he did it. And the next 4 or 5 times he came down, it seems every time I had a drainage problem for him.
Oh, so he's worked his way up. He's paid his dues there.
Yeah, well, I thought if he stands that, he's going to stick forever. And now, of course,
you're right.
we can't get rid of him. But we had to start thinking seriously about how to finance things because money was a problem.
Yeah.
As you're well aware, our geography in Cornwall makes it very difficult. We have no large conurbations around us, therefore we have a comparatively smaller uh, volume of people to act as volunteers.
Yeah.
And running railways is an expensive business. So we decided the only thing we could do was to form a company, a PLC, and issue shares.
Okay.
We eventually did that, but unfortunately it only raised about £25,000. And under company law at that time, you had to raise at least 50,000 to be able to continue.
Right.
And at that stage, we were very grateful to North Cornwall District Council because they stepped in and made us a loan of the balancing £25,000. So that enabled the company to proceed. And then we also thought we ought to take every opportunity to get donations and things. So a charity was a fairly common thing to do in these circumstances. So we formed a trust as well, the Bodmin and Wentford Railway Trust,
Yes.
which is also a company limited by guarantee. So it is actually a separate part, allied to the railway, but not part of it, if you like.
Yes. Part of the family, but yeah.
Part of the family of the railway, indeed, yes. The next, I suppose, the next big event in our history was in 1989. We eventually were granted a light railway order. That means we become a serious railway, obviously, at last.
Yeah.
And up to that point, we were able to give visitors a ride on the railway, but only up as far as the first bridge.
So for those who know the railway, that's a very short trip.
So we actually had been doing trips in brake van trips.
Yeah.
And just driving people up to the bridge and back again. And I remember one person saying to me as he got on, how far do we go? Because you can imagine brake vans were somewhat packed and like cattle. So I said up to the bridge and back, and he was stunned. He still got on. He still got on. So we've got the LRO, we can start work. And we started running some basic trains. We set to work and started the platform at Colslogget, halfway down. And to try and increase interest, we were bringing in visiting engines, regularly all over the place.
Yeah.
One of the first ones, I suppose, that really did give us a great boost was City of Truro. That brought a lot of people in.
Yeah.
Local engine, quite a famous one in the trade, and that drew in a lot of people. But we also had Green Arrow, I think I can recall, and one which was called Ugly.
Oh.
For good reason. That one was quite. I often in those days I had to do everything. And one of the things I did was ticket selling and that, and guard on the train and things. And this thing had very badly balanced wheels. So it was very much a humpity drive.
Bit of an experience.
I was constantly having to apologize to people. We also started doing Thomas events as another thing which used to make us quite a lot of money.
Yeah, and I suppose bring in different people, so something for families and, you know, locals and.
So for those of you who know uh, the fat controller, guess who was picked to be the fat controller? So I not only sort of had to oversee the day or weekend of Thomas, I had to be the fat controller as well.
Had to be doing it in character, a bit of acting.
The things I've done for the railway.
Oh, absolutely. It's that bit at the end where we're asked to do any other duties, and I'm sure in some workplaces it's, you know, doesn't really matter, but certainly at the railway it really is any other duties, isn't it?
Oh yes, yes. The other really big do that did very well for us was the visit of a tornado.
Yes.
Fairly.
Well, that's that's a more recent one in my time even, and that was an amazing thing to be part of.
Yeah, you did a nice job there, Helen. You did a nice job.
Thank you. Thank you. It was another kind of big, you know, big team effort. We all had to, you know, had to work together on that one to make the most of that opportunity. But it was brilliant. It was really brilliant.
There's one more thing I really must mention.
Okay.
And the name of Alan Moore is very well known around the railway and in railway circles generally. Alan became a wonderful benefactor. It started, I suspect, soon after the PLC was formed, and he approached us and bought, I think, if I remember rightly, £500 worth of shares.
Right.
And soon afterwards, that became 1,000.
Gosh.
And we discovered that he was at the time Deputy Chief Executive Officer of Lloyds Bank.
Right. And what was his interest kind of in Bodmin and in the railway here?
He had a very special interest because he served, I think it was 6 months of his national service in the RAF at the Joint Services School of Linguists, which was held in the barracks here opposite the railway.
Just across the road, yeah, of course.
Yeah. So that he actually travelled on the railway in those days, coming from home to the rail to the JSSL.
Yeah.
And he was a railway enthusiast. So
yeah.
of course he had a special interest in us, if you like.
Yeah.
For which we're all very grateful, I must say.
Yeah.
Because I remember when he bought those £1,000 worth of shares, I remember Philip Andrews saying to me, I think he's winding up to make a big contribution. And sure enough, I think the next one was 10,000.
Right. Which is, you know, is hugely, hugely valuable. That kind of investment, that kind of commitment makes an enormous difference.
Oh yes, it's looking back on it is quite unbelievable, really. But a couple of years ago, he had lost his wife, and he became unwell himself, and quite understandably, the tap was turned off.
Mm-hmm.
And by that time, he had actually invested in us something very close to £3 million.
Gosh.
Gosh,
An extraordinary, an extraordinary contribution.
So we owe him a great debt of thanks, and we keep constantly in touch. He rings me quite often.
Yeah.
And he has a habit of ringing me every evening at 5 o'clock, just when I started cooking, and all the saucepans are. But there you are. It's good that we can stay in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose
So
just to keep him updated as to kind of, how you're doing. You must have become close over all those years, and a bit about, how we're doing at the railway.
yes, well, he remains a director of the trust, so he's still officially in
Yeah.
connected as well. Excuse me. Well, that pretty much brings us up to date, because don't forget, it's what, 10, 12 years now since I was closely involved with the day-by-day operations. Uh, uh, there's one thing I want to say quite clearly,
Yes.
is that not only Alan was one thing, the other people that we owe a tremendous vote of thanks to are the volunteers,
Absolutely.
because without them, there's no railway.
Yeah.
So thank you all.
Yeah, I think it's extraordinary what people have done to support the railway, coming out each week, or even those people who come and kind of help us out, every year. Literally, trains wouldn't run without them.
Yes, absolutely. I think they ought to be clapped every Thursday.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And I think the other thing for me is that I love reading all of the feedback that I get on social media and online from our visitors, about the experience, which is about coming to the railway and travelling on the train, but is hugely about the people who they're meeting when they come along, and the kind of the enthusiasm and the kind of the warm welcome that the volunteers give when visitors come to the railway. So yeah, absolutely vital part of it all. Yeah.
Yes, but it's difficult. It's difficult times. Difficult times enough. Some months ago, I think most steam railways are beginning to find the pinch quite clearly.
Yeah.
And
I,
uh,
I wanted to ask
the,
you, Keith, sorry to interrupt. I wanted to ask you kind of what your thoughts are about kind of the future for the railway. Obviously, there's the situation that we're in now, but kind of looking even beyond that, as somebody who's been such an integral part of getting the railway to where it is today, us being here at all, what would be your kind of hope for the future?
that's the big question. And
Yeah.
obviously, don't forget, it's been a team job all along. It wasn't me; it was a team job.
Absolutely. But I think, it's also important for us to recognise your contribution, Keith. Father of the
Thank you.
railway, I think I've heard you affectionately known as.
Yes, I seem to have gained that title. Yes. The future, I should say that this this is my own view. It's not a view of the trust. It's my personal view, and no doubt it's coloured by my community benefit interests to some extent, as I referred to at the beginning. Uh, to my mind, pure steam railways, especially in such a difficult geographical area as this, are not going to be viable much longer on their own.
Okay.
And we are in a position where our local council, the county council, and I think to some degree the government now wants to bring back some of these old connections. I know county is very keen to reinstate a regular connection to Parkway.
Yeah.
And quite reasonably, the town wants that as well, because no town has ever thrived to any great extent if it doesn't have a railway. Excuse
Yeah.
me. So my thoughts are that the best way we can make progress is to accept a more commercial approach. it's very nice to have a pure steam railway, but if it's not going to be viable, what's the point?
Yeah.
If we can work with the county council and Great Western Railway to in some way set up the service that they want, and at the same time run our steam operations, even if they have to be separated into one goes one way and one goes the other,
Mm-hmm.
even that, or some way of knitting them all together. Don't ask me for a plan. I do not have a plan.
You've got the luxury now of just having the ideas, and yeah, you don't have to figure them out.
Well, I've had a good example in Boris after all.
Steady on.
So let's not get political.
Let's not. Yeah,
But
I think
both the county council and GWR have shown their interest in their support, financial support for the second platform idea.
of course.
And if they're prepared to invest in those levels, I think there should be every hope of coming to some agreement which could keep the railway going. And if we could get some such thing as that going, we are already a unique railway in the preservation scene simply by having two branches out of one station.
Yes.
If we were one of the first preserved railways to have a sort of mixed operation with the main line, that would make us doubly unique, and maybe attract more business for ourselves. That's the sort of lines I would think the most likely, but I repeat, that's only my opinion.
Of course. Yeah, I think it's great that there are people who are kind of interested in working with us, and who see us as as an asset. So the fact that the council do, I think, is brilliant, and certainly the kind of conversations that we should be having, so that we can kind of benefit the community that we're part of here in Bodmin, in addition to kind of the tourism side of things, with kind of the money and the visitors that we bring into the town, but also the fact that if we're able to survive and be sustainable, then that puts us in a really good position to kind of keep preserving that heritage and history, which otherwise we might not be able to. So no, I think you making a lot of sense, Keith, I think. Yeah.
Oh, that's a first.
Hey, a first possibly, and perhaps a good way to kind of wrap up our chat. Thank you very much.
Right.
Thank you very much for taking the time to catch up with me. I really, really appreciate it. And I think, there are things that I didn't know about, despite having been at the railway for a few years now. And it's great to actually hear them from you. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you for having me, as they say.
That's quite all right. And hopefully we'll be having these kind of conversations in person soon. But until then, take care. And I'll let you get back to the garden.
Thanks a lot.
Bye, Keith.
You take care as well.
Bye.
Bye.